you have that voice in your head that's telling you all these things. Like you have one that potentially is saying, yeah, you can do it, and then on the other side, it's like, no, you can't do it. So it's about not listening to the one that says you can't do it, and it's about strengthening the one that says you can do it. Welcome to the Red Print, your wellness podcast. My name is Daanish Shah.
I'm Rachel Williams.
I'm Neil Sutherland.
And today's topic is going to be pressure and how to deal with it. Welcome to the Red Print, your wellness podcast. I just wanted to talk about, before we get into our topic of the week, pressure, I wanted to talk about why this podcast started in the first place. So throughout the time of being online in the pandemic at university, I realized students perhaps aren't as motivated completing their work, attending university. Some, of course, may struggle to get out of bed. And then as soon as I heard these situations occurring, I realized it's not, was it something to shy away from? Understanding that you're not alone in terms of, yes, you may feel perhaps pressure coming down on you, you're unsure what to do, you may not want to attend the lessons because of what you're feeling inside. And I just wanted to address that before we start, that you're not alone in terms of a way you think, and that's why not just me, Neil, Rachel as well, and I'm sure people listening to you may resonate with that. You're not alone in thinking that all these emotions within your mind is perfectly normal. It's not something you should run away from. It's not something you should ignore. It's something you should accept, because at the end of the day, your mind is yours and no one else can take control of it apart from you. So what we're doing in this podcast specifically is addressing the key issues perhaps impacting students, and I know it won't just apply to students because it's a universal point. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is expanding upon these issues such as mental health, well-being, anxiety, even going towards how to become motivated again, how to be disciplined. And then this won't just lead during your time in the pandemic, it will lead across that, whether in year 1, year 2, or year 3 about to graduate, because this hopefully may teach you something new and may give you another perspective, because after all, we're sharing our ideas, our experiences, our thoughts. Let's get started. So the topic is pressure, all right? So first things first, we're going to be talking about the main sources of it, where does it come from, and of course, how to address them, how to deal with them, all right? So what do you guys think for pressure? What are your own thoughts? What are your opinions on it?
Yeah, I think when I think of pressure, it comes from loads of different places. But for me, and when I was a student, and also when I'm working now during the pandemic, a lot of the pressure comes from myself and my own expectations of who I should be, what I should be doing. I think a bit comes from society as well. Yeah. Like I think that I need to be being a useful and productive person. And if I don't do exactly the perfect thing all the time and not being productive all the time, I think that I am an awful human. So I think a lot of the pressure for me comes from myself, but I think that's also like informed by societal expectations too. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, I remember reading something a few years ago, and it was about the idea of putting demands on yourself, and that demands can lead to pressure. So, a demand would be, I must do this, I must perform at this standard, I must get this grade on something. And if I don't do that thing, then something awful will happen, or I won't be able to cope, or, so we exist in now, and we think about this future, and we think about this particular thing happening, and then going, that would be a catastrophe if that happened. So we put this demand on ourselves. And of course, what happens as a result of that is that it reifies what's going to happen in the future. And it makes it this huge, huge thing that then becomes really insurmountable, because we know, the stakes are so high. And I think this tendency for us to put demands on ourselves, I would 100% agree, it is societally informed, about what you should be doing, what you should be getting. If you actually kind of reframe demands into something different. So the particular thing I was reading is about demands versus preferences. So, you've got this demand that puts pressure on you, but if you turn that into a preference, I would rather do this, but if the alternative happens, I will cope, or it will be fine, or the result won't be as bad as I thought. That can start to relieve some of that pressure. But I think as human beings, and anyone that's at university, you're here because you're a high performing individual. It's very easy to put a demand on yourself, I think, and being aware of that is a big first step.
Because at the end of the day, I think a common theme is for students, you want to get the best grade possible. And then perhaps that expectation's in your head, you're like, okay, I have to get the best grade possible. And let's say you don't do as well for one grade. And then through that single happenstance, you might feel a little bit crap just because of that. However, I think a common thing is that you just have to accept it and then look forward and then know exactly what you need to do to make it better. Because at the end of the day, it's happened, it's reality. You can accept it and then move forward, address it, break it down. And then alongside that, the pressure might come from, let's say, I understand, like with group work, like you may see in your head, like, yes, everyone is really focused, everyone knows exactly what to do, and then you get the best grade possible through that, because I'm sure that's a common theme, because everyone wants to do well, more or less, at university, because it's important to them, otherwise they wouldn't be here in the first place. So group work, so they may want, for example, one time, everyone doing well. However, reality is there's not much communication in the group. Okay, so you have these two thoughts and realities coming in together, and then that might create pressure in your head because it's not giving you exactly what you want in the first place. So what I would say to that is, so you have this vision in your head of everyone in the group working together, however they're not. So I'd say put it in your control and speak to the people in the group. Tell them your thoughts and what you want to exactly do, because I'm sure they agree with that as well. They just haven't vocalized it. So I suppose it's, from my perspective, student perspective, I think it's getting out of your head, understanding what you can do to take that pressure that's in your head, put it out there, using it, rather than just letting it control you, not letting you get out of bed, wondering what the hell you're going to do with all this work. So I guess it's just taking practical steps rather than letting it control you.
You're reminding me of, there's a line in a song in Hamilton, which always reminds me of this and helps me with this, which is, I am the one thing in life I can control. And I think that sometimes as well. And I've thought of that during the pandemic as well. It's like other stuff is going on. There's government rules, there's the university, there's teaching moving online, there's all these things happening, but I am the one thing in life that I can control. I have control over me and my actions and what I do and how I respond. And like you said, with group work, sometimes it can feel like this
it's out of your control.
Yeah, out of control. But you know what? The only thing I can control is me and how I do stuff. And that makes me feel better as well. So I think that's great advice, Daanish.
That's it.
Yeah, agree. And I think coming out of that with the idea of not bottling things up and talking to people, as you say, everyone might not know how you're feeling about something. To you, how you feel is total, like when you're feeling something, you are aware of everything that comes out and why you feel like that and what annoyed you and what someone said or what someone did. Like all of that is fully in your consciousness. Whereas to other people, what they might not see any of that. And actually having those sort of constructive conversations, and whether that is with your colleagues, whether that's with tutors or whatever, having those open lines of dialogue and learning skills of how to talk about yourself and learning skills of how to be comfortable in discussing your emotions in something, whether you feel that they are rational or irrational, it doesn't matter. It's being able to have those conversations, which can be difficult, but ultimately when you get into the habit of doing something like that, it's straightforward.
At the end of the day, your thoughts, as you said, they're in your head, they're not in anyone else's head. Like, as long as you get it out there, people will understand how you think. Because I think I may go off on a tangent here. So anyway, so I think your thoughts, yes, they are very important. However, the world's not going to know them if you just keep them in your head at the end of the day. Like, what's the point in thinking all these great thoughts? Yes, act upon them, live it. However, through living it, you can share your thoughts, share your experiences. And that ties in with the thoughts at the end of the day, putting them out there, vocalizing them, writing down what you need to do, and then speaking with your group, speaking with whoever you're working with, or just speaking with yourself what you need to do next. But yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that I've had to develop like some coping mechanisms to deal with pressure and stress, like especially sort of during my PhD. I think I felt that a lot. And the main thing that helps me is just taking time for myself. So I'll go for a walk, I'll do the dishes, just spending time in and just letting myself think a bit and clarify, okay, what do I think and why do I think that? And questioning my thoughts, because thoughts are not always reality, or they're not like prophecies. Like sometimes you'll think something, you'll feel something so strongly, but that's not actually even what's going on. So I'll kind of interrogate that and think about it. And I find it helpful to take a moment to myself first to clarify and to figure out why I'm feeling like this. And then I share it. And then I talk to usually like my parents. I talk to my mum a lot about stuff. And I think that when I was a student, something that always like put me off talking to like lecturers and people about anything I was going through is that I was scared of crying. And I don't know if anyone else feels like that, but whenever I feel like pressure and frustrated and I'm gonna have to talk about something that's really personal, yeah, I worry I'll cry. And I think my advice to students around that would just be like, it's okay if you have a cry. We're used to seeing people cry and it's not a big deal. Like sometimes people have a little cry, it's all right, don't worry. So if that's ever like your worry, oh, don't worry, just have a cry. Don't let that put you off reaching out. Because that's what put me off. And I think I could have got way more help when I was going through stuff at uni if I'd have reached out. Because I spoke to my personal tutor about it afterwards. She's like, why didn't you say? Because I got really ill. Like, why didn't you say all this is going on? I was like, oh, don't know. I was scared I was going to cry. That was my issue.
And it kind of comes around to what we were saying about earlier, the idea of judgment as well, I guess, because it's, if it's being scared of crying, and presumably that's also then the judgment that would come from that other person about what does that mean about me and how would they see me, and pressure is so much something, like we said before, yes, it comes from internally, but it's all about the perception of other people and what other people think about us, and we afford that this huge amount. And something else that I find really useful with those situations is think about, if your best friend came to you and said the same thing, what advice would you give them? And there is no situation that you can get through where you don't give yourself exactly the right answer, where someone, when you've got a problem that's happening and saying, okay, well, I feel like I'm worried about being judged if I go to someone with this particular problem. What would you advise your best friend? What you say to your best friend is, that doesn't matter. Your health is most important. You need to go and do that. And it doesn't matter if you cry or if you are It doesn't matter. And I think that's a really useful, really simple technique for being able to just take yourself out of the situation. It takes some of the weight off of the situation, right? It means that you're not just thinking about it from your perspective, but you're also starting to just step outside of it as well.
That's good for your self-talk too, isn't it? Like, when you talk to yourself, sometimes a voice in your head, or you talk to yourself and you're like, oh, you're rubbish because you haven't done this, or your group, you're not doing well enough on your group work, or you say that stuff to yourself. But yeah, talk to yourself like you talk to your friend as well. You wouldn't say, oh my God, you're such a lazy piece of rubbish because you didn't do that much today. So I think that's great advice.
Be a critical friend to yourself.
Yeah, that's key. That's key. Because as you said, you have that voice in your head that's telling you all these things. Like, you have one that potentially is saying, yeah, you can do it, and then on the other side, it's like, no, you can't do it. So it's about not listening to the one that says you can't do it, and it's about strengthening the one that says you can do it. Yeah, it's very, I suppose the key thing is mindset, ideally, just mindset, because pressure can go both ways. It can either, I suppose, break you down more or less, because of course pressure can break you down if you don't handle it right. So that's how, of course, you might get these outbursts, stuff like that, which is natural. As you experience it, you understand what triggers it, as you mentioned earlier. Like through understanding that, you go, okay, this has happened. Now I need to go do this. So, for example, strengthening the voice that's in your head that will make you stronger. Go for a walk outside. Just get outside. The weather might not be great, as long as there's no lightning coming down or anything like that. Just walk outside, get outside. Because when you remain idle, I think the key thing in the pandemic is when you remain idle, just at home in the same spot, it can get to you. Like whether you're working, you're studying, you're staying in one room, it'll, I suppose, it'll just drain your mind, drain your mental energy, because it'll be very monotonous. Of course, the monotonous things will help you through certain times, but you can change it up, change your location a little bit, do something different in your day, or perhaps just get your brain going again.
Intuitively, it can sometimes feel very much like the best thing that you can do with your day is sit down at your computer at 7 a.m. and just keep working and just keep, and if I get up, then I'm reneging on my responsibility to do this bit of work. But actually, always, your best ideas come from the times when you're in the shower, just before you go into sleep, when you're going for a walk, when you're listening to something, when you're doing things where your brain is actually forgotten about all of that pressure. So for me, like driving is amazing for that, because my mind is taken away by something else, which means that it then becomes freer and I get more creative.
Oh, I think you might even know where I'm going with this, because I've got some views. I think exercise can be a fantastic thing and can be a useful thing for some people.
Of course.
The thing that I'm always mindful of is that sometimes people's relationship with exercise can become the thing that they then have pressure. Like, I'm a bad person because I'm not exercising. Some people have eating disorders. Some people might have disabilities that mean that exercise isn't part of their daily lives or their weekly lives, or isn't a part of their life. And that's okay as well. So if you're someone who benefits from exercise, fantastic, do that. That's great for you. If you're someone who has had an unhealthy relationship with exercise in the past, or you're someone who feels a lot of pressure to exercise, or you have a disability or an eating disorder or anything like that, there are other things you can do. And I think Daanish also mentioned other things that can be great, like even within your own space, go and do a bit of Lego.
Scalable.
Do a craft, go and sit somewhere else and go and do the dishes, whatever. Just don't feel like you have to be doing things that are productive all the time. Even though I just mentioned doing the dishes, find something to do that is unproductive. I like playing Animal Crossing. I like, doing all different kinds of things, playing The Sims, even though that's me sat at the computer again. But yeah, it's just something to be mindful of. And I never want people to feel like if they don't exercise, they're a bad person, because that can become a pressure cycle all over again.
A cycle that carries on going. I understand.
Yeah, and it's different for each person. Like, we're all different. So yeah, just shout out for anyone who feels like that.
Do you folks find that when things are feeling very heavy, that when you write down a list, and even something as simple as a to-do list, you realize that there's actually less things on your mind than you thought there were? So I often find that when I'm writing something down, when my brain feels like there's just hundreds of things going on, and I actually just write down a list of, okay, what do I actually need to do? What are the things that I actually need to complete? When I write it down, suddenly it looks way more manageable than when it was in my head. So in my head, it feels like everything's clambering over each other. So I assume it's massive and it's this big knot. And then I write it down like, okay, well, what's the big task? And I find, with me with to-do lists, the big task is always at the start of the day. I try not to schedule anything in for the start of my day, because the big task that I don't want to do always happens right at the top. And then it gets the littler task and like the nice jobs. But yeah, I find that writing stuff down, and again, just taking it outside of my head, really helps to put things into perspective and to make it seem less like it's a big mess and more of a kind of a structured way of approaching it.
It takes energy to hold it in your head. That's what I find. It's like, it takes energy for me to like try and keep track of all these things. So just writing it down, it's like, okay, that's something, at least I don't have to try and remember everything, because I'm so worried about forgetting it that I end up like just going over it all the time in my head. So I find writing it down helpful for that.
Please, may I hear about both of your routines for writing to-do lists? I'm a big to-do list writer, so can I hear about your daily routine? Do you have daily routines? Do you have weekly routines?
I just have an ongoing list.
Okay. What does it look like? Is it online? Is it a paper list? What's it
Piece
look
of
like?
paper, which is actually currently in my car, which is bad. But it's like I have like a pad, and I'll write out a list of the things I need to do, and then I cross things off it, and then every so often I just rip one off and I copy onto the next one. It's just an ongoing.
Oh, I've seen your pad. Yeah, I know your pad.
Well, you know, I have one in the office. Like, so I have that, but I've got a smaller one at the moment for home because I got a smaller desk. But yeah, I just have a pad, write them down, rip it off, put another one on. How about you, Daanish?
I do the same. I got the pad. I showed you a pad. What I do is, so I just write down 5 things I have to do in a day that are important. So I just took, so before I talk about, we'll talk about it in a later podcast. So you just figure out what your goal is, and then you have 5. So you have different goals. It could be, for example, what is it? Spiritual, physical, financial, all those different areas. Then I separate 5 critical tasks. I could do, let's say, for example, I'll talk you through 5 critical tasks for anyone listening as well if they want to do it. So number 1, let's say, for example, I have to, so let's say I want to gain weight because I want to gain muscle. Okay, so I have to eat a certain amount of calories and I have to eat a certain amount of protein. Okay, so that'll be number 1. So that's what I'll do in a day. But then number 2, I have to read 10 pages of a book a day because I'm out of that habit. Okay, and then number 3, it goes on to going outside for a walk because I'm out of the habit of going outside, like, you know, exercise and get my body moving. So it's in that theme.
Having a done list is also a really nice counterpoint to to-do lists and because I found this, I was getting to a point where you know when you get to the end of the day and you're like, what have I even done today? Like, what have I actually achieved today? Because you get to, you know, maybe get to 5 and maybe you've done loads of little tasks, but the ones that happened at 8 o'clock that morning, you've just totally forgotten about. And having a done list, or, you know, just having a thing of things that I have achieved today is so satisfying to get to the end of the day, because you don't realize how much stuff you achieve, and really adding everything onto that, you know, as tiny things. You know, I answered that email that I didn't want to answer, or I did this thing, or I downloaded this lecture, or I went onto here. Having that list really makes you realize how productive you are. And without that, and without, you know, list writing, I think for me has been really quite transformative in terms of how when I say efficient, I don't mean that I'm just trying to be like uber productive, but effective. It's kind of like in terms of cleaning my brain and allowing me just to focus on those things without me becoming more anxious or feeling pressured. And I love at the end of the day having a look at my done list and seeing what has actually been achieved and thinking, and it then becomes much more fun having a to-do list, because it becomes like something a bit like Animal Crossing. You know, you've got like your jobs for that day and you've got your tasks for that day, and it's like I write my to-do list the night before, so that when I come down in the morning, I've literally can just start. And then as soon as I've ticked one thing off, all right, that felt good to get that thing ticked off. What can I do next? Okay, right, cool. Oh, that felt good. Okay, I've got a longer task now. Okay, well, I've already ticked a couple of quick things off, so let's get involved in that longer task. And the sense of satisfaction that comes from it is lovely. Whereas otherwise, without a list, for me, life feels endless. The jobs feel endless.
So, and if you get to the point of the day, you have got that list, you've done none of it. You haven't done a single thing. You are still a valid person. You're a fantastic person. You're still a good person. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. You can still go to sleep happy. It is okay. You know, and I think that's just something else. We are human beings. There's a book that's recently come out called There's No Such Thing as Laziness. And I'd recommend just looking into that. And the author, if that's something that you kind of say to yourself a lot. If you're self-talkers, I'm lazy, I'm rubbish. There are going to be some days where you don't get everything done on your list, where you don't get anything done on your list. And it is okay. This is all part of the bigger picture. And we are human beings. I get so many students saying to me that they think they're lazy and they think that they are bad because they're not motivated enough during the pandemic. And, you know, the truth is we're humans in a difficult situation. And as much as we're giving you advice on things you can do to try and help you get stuff done, if you don't do that, it's okay. You're still a good person. It's all right. None of these are a reflection on your value as a human being. So yeah, always keep that in mind.
I think I agree 100%. I understand, like, feeling inside of yourself, you aren't achieving what you're supposed to do. You may, it gets to you because you're in your head, you're thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this, this, and this. And then it's coming back into your mind and it's eating away at you. That there are days, there are months, there are years where you may potentially feel not in your greatest position, greatest mindset, greatest mental point in your life, and how to transition potentially out of that, not out of that, accepting it, because it always happens. Like, it's not something that will go away. It's something that will happen reciprocally. It will happen every now and then, and it's just like going through that, accepting it. So I think that'll be an interesting topic for next week.
I'm looking forward to next week now.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. As always, it'll be good.
All right then, folks. Well, listen, I think we have very nicely but only scratched the surface of all of the things that we're going to be, all of the things that we've been talking about. But a great introduction to these ideas, and you know, speaking about pressure, thinking about where pressure comes from, this idea of something that's external and something that if we bring it more into our awareness, that can be really helpful, that there's some practical tips of how we can start to manage that. And ultimately this being an individual pursuit, and that we're finding ways of coping that actually suit us. You know, there's no one quick fix for these things, but there might be some commonalities amongst what we are experiencing with this, and that those sorts of commonalities we'll get to explore as the weeks go on.
Beautiful.
Excellent. All right then, folks, lovely to see you. See you next week.